Republican lawmakers have made no bones about it that they are looking at environmental regulation, how they are affecting job creation, economic growth in North Carolina. They're now focusing on local governments and those governments' ability to pass local ordinances that affect the environment, particularly ordinances that are, quote, more stringent than state or federal guidelines. The General Assembly has temporarily banned local governments from passing any environmental ordinances that are, quote, more stringent than current state or federal environmental regulations. Local government representatives are now telling lawmakers that three-letter term, more stringent than, needs clarity if state lawmakers are considering a permanent limitation to their local lawmaking ability.
Dealing with this concept of more stringent than, kind of the overriding concern is what does it mean? And this is a difficult thing to get your hands around, and we've struggled with it legally. I think that's something that probably needs to be explored in the discussion that we'll have over the next couple months.
Local government groups say towns should have the flexibility to pass some tough environmental ordinances that protect core economic interests. Think about the tourist area, like a beach town where water quality is the fuel of the economic engine, so tough rules might be appropriate, they say. Lawmakers are also told mountain counties need distinct ordinances for steep slopes, and they aren't found anywhere else in North Carolina.
Many of the mountain counties have steep slope ordinances to address the more extreme results of erosion and sedimentation in the mountains because of things like the high velocity of water flow, the narrow depth of soil to bedrock, and the sensitive natural resources in those areas such as the trout streams.
Industry groups are saying there's a hodgepodge of city and county laws and ordinances that are impeding job growth and economic development. They say local politicians are passing environmental ordinances faster than businesses can sue to stop them.
Businesses don't have the time or resources to run to Superior Court all over the state to stop these types of regulations that are sort of put under the guise of environmental regulation.
Home builders tell state lawmakers that local governments pass ordinances often without full scientific vetting.
One of the more common examples that we have in terms of land development for residential types has to do with buffers. And it's a kind of a mentality at the local level that if 50 feet is great, then 100 feet must be doubly great. But there really isn't any justification or any marginal increase in environmental protection that occurs from that.
These are just the opening arguments in a debate that could lead well beyond the 2014 legislative session. Representative Chuck McGrady is part of it's a subcommittee that will look at local governments enacting local environmental ordinances.
That's right, a task force.
What's the deal?
Coming out of the General Assembly, there was a study committee set up to look at just how far cities and counties ought to be able to go in enacting environmental ordinances.
What is the conservative viewpoint on giving local governments power to enact their own laws? That is local governorship.
Yeah, I don't know what you call it conservative or not. There's some people that feel like local governments govern best and they ought to be given broad authority to deal with a range of things, environmental or otherwise. And then there's another view that local governments abuse that authority by getting into a whole range of things that simply add cost, particularly in areas where, for example, the Department of Environment and Natural Resources is already regulating.
What are your thoughts on that? You were placed as the point person. Did you go into this issue with an open mind, or do you have an opinion about where you think local governments are in terms of their own policing power, if you will?
I guess I feel strongly both ways. I used to be a county commissioner, and on the one hand, I understand that local governments are the ones that, they're that's where the rubber meets the road, and they oftentimes have to respond to situations that occur by enacting ordinances. On the other hand, you see ordinances sometimes that you really wonder, aren't they just about not allowing something to happen? You make it so expensive in terms of design criteria or something else that in fact they're really just banning something that they don't want to happen in their community.
Are there a lot of these de facto bans in place at the local level, whereas if the ordinance wasn't there, state law and federal law would permit an activity or a type of construction or design?
And that's what we're trying to find out. I mean, this is going to be an open process, trying to bring people in. Let's talk about, give us situations. I don't know the answer to that right now.
You know, I've seen these committees, and sometimes folks lead them and say, I wasn't heard or wasn't allowed to speak. How are you approaching the study of this when you hear from business and industry versus local and county governments who are stepping forward to give you their side of whether they need flexibility to pass law?
The first time we discussed this was at the ERC meeting, and that was just an introduction. Senator Brock and I co-chair the task force, and we're going to invite pros and cons. And hopefully we'll hear not just from the League of Municipalities, but specific towns and cities, not just the County Commissioners Association, but specific counties if they've got concerns. And likewise, whether it's in the business community or within offices of state government, what are your concerns here? Have you seen cities or counties overstep, or is there a need for cities and counties to do things that the state or the feds can't do?
Going forward into the short session, which is just a few months away, if you make recommendations later this spring, is there time in the short session to enact a law that would change any coming recommendations, or do you take the long view, pick this up in 2015 when the next biennium starts?
I'm expecting we'll take the long view. We've got a semi-moratorium in place that goes until October 1st, meaning no ordinances related to the environment can be passed by cities and counties unless it's done unanimously. So we need to deal with that issue one way or the other. But I think it's more likely that this process will put everything on the table and hopefully bring the counties and cities to the table to talk with these other interests and see if they can resolve it without the need for the General Assembly to do anything.
Well, we'll be tracking the issue in future oversight committees. Representative McGrady, thanks for being on the show.
Good to be here.